By watching this video up to the end, you will understand exactly the entire process on how you can apply for English teaching jobs here in Japan. You will know exactly the requirements, what are the educational requirements and other certifications that you might be required to have in order to qualify for English teaching jobs in Japanese schools. If you have been thinking of working in Japan as an English teacher and you didn't know where to start, what to do exactly, this video is right for you. An interesting thing is that every year Japan recruits foreigners to work here as English teachers, whether in kindergarten or high school or in other types of English schools. So if you have been thinking to come here to work as an English teacher, stick around. First, let's look at the requirements, the educational requirements. What qualification are you supposed to have in order to work as an English teacher in Japan? The main qualification is a bachelor's degree. And your bachelor's degree does not need to be in education or in teaching language. It can be in any professional field, whether it's agriculture or engineering, it doesn't matter. But at the minimum, you need a bachelor's degree. In addition to the academic qualification, you might also be required to have some certification in English teaching. So for example, there's teaching English as a foreign language. That can give you some extra advantage, but that's not the prerequisite. It's just an additional for most schools. Apart from having the educational qualification and other additional certifications which you might have or might not have, you have to demonstrate your interest to come and work here in Japan and be interested as well in their culture, because Japan has a unique culture. Therefore, if you're a foreigner, you should do your own research beforehand and understand how best you can come here and adapt to the culture in order for you to work properly as a teacher. English teaching jobs in Japan are for both native and non-native speakers, but there are certain institutions that recruit native speakers only. So if you are a non-native speaker, make sure that you apply to institutions that accept non-native speakers. Now that you understand the basic requirements to be an English teacher in Japan, there are a few other things that I want to share with you which can help you to be successful in your application for a job as a teacher in Japan. One of the most important things is your resume. So this gives the first impression to the employer. Make sure that when you are writing your resume, it is very concise and you only share necessary information. And if possible, highlight areas that are related to English teaching. Writing a concise resume is very important when you are applying for jobs here in Japan. So make sure that you find the Japanese format of a CV. That could help you also. Most recruiters in Japan, they have their own unique resume, which might be a little bit different from the resume which you are used to write when applying jobs in your country. Therefore, I would suggest that when you are making an application for teaching jobs in Japan, you should use the Japanese format of a resume. That might help in making your application package outstanding. One of the unique features which most recruiters here in Japan expect to show or to have on your resume is your picture. So make sure that you have a good quality picture inserted on your resume. The other thing also is to show that you have some background research information about the institution which you are applying for. This you can demonstrate by tailoring your resume and your application according to the specific requirements of the job that you're applying for. Not all schools in Japan have the same demands. So make sure that before you apply to any specific school or before you make an application, you look at their description, job description, and you are satisfied that you have or you possess those requirements or you're comfortable with some of their demands. So one of the demand which might vary between institutions is that some institutions sponsor your visa. So one of the things which might also be different depending on the school or the institution you're applying for is whether they sponsor a visa or not. Some institutions will offer visa support. This means that if you satisfy the requirements and they offer you the job, they will process or they will help you to process a working visa to come to Japan. Without a working visa, you cannot come to Japan. So they can support you by giving you the necessary documents which you have to complete, and they will do their part to fulfill the requirements of the immigration standards here in Japan. But there are some institutions which do not offer visa support. Therefore, when you are applying and you know that you cannot get a visa by yourself, then avoid applying to institutions which do not offer visa support. Those might be useful for people who maybe are already in Japan, because it might be easier for them to apply and then change their current visa status. For example, if they are a student, they can easily change to working visa if they are already in Japan. Now let's look at how do you find those jobs. I think most people who ask me about job opportunities here in Japan as to work as teachers, they tend to ask this question: where do we find those openings? So most openings are already online, or most job openings are on the internet. So there are several ways how institutions in Japan recruit foreigners. One of the way they do it is by recruiting directly. An institution, a school, for example, on their website, they can advertise directly that they have job openings and they're looking for people to apply from different countries. So in that way, you make the application directly. The other way institutions in Japan recruit foreigners is through recruitment agencies. So in this case, you as an applicant, you do not apply directly to the school where you be teaching if you get the offer. You apply to the recruitment agency. So most of the processes you do through the agency, which includes doing the interviews and the other things. In this case, where you apply through the agency, it means your first contact in Japan will be that agency until a certain level or stage where they have maybe assessed you, and according to their standards, you qualify to proceed to the other level where you can now be in touch with the institution or the school where you'll be placed. In both cases, whether you're applying directly to a school or you're applying through agencies, the most common method is through creating an account on their website. In creating an account on those website or job platforms, it's where you provide your details, including the resume, including your level of English, for example, English fluency. If you have some special certificates, you also submit through such kind of accounts or platforms, your education and any other detail. So depending on the platform that you are using, some of the requirements might vary, but most of the basic requirements are submitted in a similar style. One more thing about application through agency is that you can apply anytime. If you are using an agency, the best you can do is to first of all just create an account there. Once you create your account, they'll be sending you emails with job openings that align with your application package or with your skills, and then you'll be applying for those jobs. So if you are applying through an agency, you can start that process anytime, so that whenever they have the openings, they can forward to you. Where do you find those platforms, or where do you find those schools? So under the description of this video, I'll put several links where you can find such kind of jobs. All you have to do is to click on them and check or create account on them, and if you are interested, then start your application procedures. If you are to apply through a school directly, usually you might see their opening advert on their website. If they have it, then you can start the application right away. If it's closed, then you can wait for the next opening. The important thing is simply to have this kind of websites, and you know them, so that you know when they're open opportunities, or you know when it's right time for you to apply depending on your specific needs. One other question which I get asked most is like, how much are the salary expectations, or what should I expect as a salary if I get an English teaching job in Japan? So the salary basically varies depending on whether you are a native speaker or you are a non-native speaker. So usually native speaker earns more than non-native speaker, but as an average, industry average, as of this year, the average salary for English teaching jobs is around 300,000, depending on several other factors. Some people might earn lower than this, and other people might earn more than this, but an average industry standard here in Japan is around 300,000 yen per month. Also note that Japanese recruitment happens in two phases usually. So you have a phase for people living in Japan and another phase for people living outside Japan. If you are living or you are making an application while you are outside Japan, make sure that you apply during the period when you have openings for people living outside Japan. That will help you a lot, because if that phase has been completed, you might need to wait for the next year when the same phase opens. One more important thing is to note that in Japanese recruitment for teachers, usually it happens in two phases. One phase is the recruitment of teachers within Japan, so applicants who are already in Japan. And also the other is for recruitment of potential teachers who are outside Japan. So because if you are outside Japan, there are a lot of procedures, immigration procedures and other protocols that must be followed. If you get the offer, that phase opens first, then followed by the second phase where people within Japan can apply. So it's very critical to ensure that you apply when the phase is still open, especially if you're applying outside Japan, because if you miss the phase for that year, it means you have to wait for the next year for the same phase to apply. So if you are outside Japan, make sure that you check these phases and apply when it's the right time to apply. In the event that you have made a successful application and you have been shortlisted, the next important thing is to do well during the interview. In this case, the interviews are done online if you are living outside Japan. So therefore, you should be familiar with taking interviews, job interviews online. Sometimes being in front of the camera and describing or answering questions about your professional skills, your abilities might be difficult for some people. So if you feel like that might be difficult for you, it's very important that before the interview, you should also work on yourself, on your presentation skills on camera, because the interview will be done online. You in one country and the recruiters here in Japan. So it's very important to have this skill as regards to performing well during interviews. And also, just a point of emphasis, if you have an interest in Japan, like to work in Japan, make sure that you read a little bit more about Japan. Have a general overview of what Japan is, what Japan offers, what's their culture, and how is the industry you are applying for. Because this kind of general knowledge might give you an edge during the interview. They don't expect someone to go to the interview where they know nothing about Japan, nothing about their culture, nothing about the challenges related to English, which is the industry you are trying to enter into. So make sure that before the interview, if you have that chance, you have a little bit of understanding of the Japanese work environment. Thank you for watching. Remember to subscribe so that when I post new videos, you should be notified. If you have questions, leave them in the comment section. I'll attend to them. Thank you. Goodbye.